Hi, I'm indie fantasy author Melinda Crucera, and we're back with another episode of Fantasy Lore and More. And today we're here with JC Snow to talk about the Phoenix and the Sword. So let's bring her on in. Welcome, JC, and let's talk about the Phoenix and the Sword.
Okay, so the Phoenix and the Sword, I have it with me. So like on a I did another YouTube thing where I didn't bring my book and felt like a giant loser, but here it is. This is what it looks like in its paperback version. And
Wait.
it is
For
the
those who
first,
are
yes?
listening, the cover is red and there's a sword and,
Yeah.
and some really beautiful
Mm-hmm.
typography. And there's
Mm-hmm.
is that a
Yeah, and there's
forest or?
also, no, it's a phoenix. It's
Oh, it's
a,
a okay.
yeah, I'm like, for those of you who can't see, I am like mixing with the green filter and sometimes coming in and out with my background in a mysterious way. But the book is actually, the cover has a like this brilliant crimson bird on it, and wings outspread, and there's a red ribbon that's connecting the sword to the phoenix, and there's a lot of kind of hints of flame and golden things around the phoenix. I've gotten used to like writing alt text for images, so
Ah,
this is how I describe it. And so the title is The Phoenix and the Sword, and it is book one in the Crane Moon cycle. Oh, it's a duology. The second book is called The Shoreless River, and the two books together make up one full story. And so this summer, I re-released both books as an omnibus version. So now you can also, instead of buying both books separately, it's possible to just buy the duology in one book, and then you have the whole book in one giant book, which is really the best way to read it, because going right from the end of book one into book two, I think, is probably the most rewarding way to get the story. Um, and yeah, so that's the basic information. Like, this is the book. Um, and why don't you like ask me, like, when you see this book, The Phoenix and the Sword, you're kind of wondering, like, what is this book? Why is there a giant bird on the cover? and,
I was
so
actually wondering that.
So, all right. So the Phoenix and the Sword and the Shoreless River again are, it is a love story, and it's a double love story. And it is a love story that involves multiple identities and past lives. And so it's hard to talk about it as like a simple story, but it begins with a person named Eiley Fallon, who is living in a world that's pretty much like our own around the 1940s. There's a war on, and she is training to be a combat nurse, which is one of the very few things that in her world a woman could do. And she is also a lesbian, which in that world is not a super cool thing to be. But she has a community, she has a friend. She is determined to do this with her life because she wants to get away from some bad things in her own past. Um, and just before she's about to ship out and to do her work as a combat nurse, she meets a really mysterious person who introduces herself as Tyre. And Tyre is very, very intriguing and very strange. And Eileen's friends warn her about Tyre. But without spoiling the book, it's really, really hard to go much further than that. But you know that going into it, that this begins with the story of Eileen and Tyre, and what is going to happen to them is going to reveal some aspects of Eileen's own nature and reality that she was completely unaware of, and a whole other world of spiritual power and magic and beings that can take both magical and human forms. And within this world, one of those kinds of being is a phoenix, and the another kind of being is a demon. And in terms of, like, thinking about coming on this podcast, which is supposed to be about the lore of the world, um, it's important to know that a lot of the lore of this world, a lot of the world building is inspired by Chinese fantasy genres. And so it's inspired by Xianxia and Wuxia and Xuanhuan novels, which are about the beings of mythology coming into these novels and coming into the stories. So it's not like those novels fully because the spiritual and magical beings are not fully like the Chinese versions, but it's very much inspired by that. And so there's a lot of those aspects of spiritual power and cultivation and chi and dragons and all kinds of amazing things that are woven into the book.
Wow.
There's a lot.
So you're gonna now that you've teased us, you're gonna give us an excerpt.
I will. And because the book's timelines, because it's a dual timeline book, and because there are a lot of things that you almost can't read without giving massive spoilers, I chose kind of an encapsulated short excerpt, moving towards the middle of the book. So if you look at the book on Amazon, you can read, several chapters in. So I didn't choose the beginning because you can go read those chapters. It's pretty easy for you to do. But something that gets past the beginning into when things start getting really, really unexpected. And so this is where Aili is about to make a transition into a very, very different world. And she is doing that with the help of a mysterious person named Tainu. And Tainu has just encouraged her. I'm not going to lie, it's a little surprising. Tainu has just encouraged her to jump into a volcano. And so she is doing that. And there are reasons that she is doing that, which will make sense if you read the book. But so this is her getting ready to go into the volcano and falling through the volcano. And where is it going to take her? Okay, so as she fell, Aili felt a strange sense of exhilaration. It was only a few seconds, but there was nothing to worry about now. Everything that could be done had been done. Falling was as though she was leaving it all behind, all her life. Done and undone, it was behind her now. The heat started to crisp her clothes and hair. Next to her, a red bird dove with folded wings like a falcon, its head stretched towards the fire below them. The bird flicked its wings and suddenly was directly ahead of her, below her, falling at a constant speed that matched hers. She could have reached out and grabbed the scarlet tail feathers. "Don't," said Tainu's voice. He sounded strained, as though he couldn't manage any more. The wings of the bird stretched very carefully against the blistering wind, very slightly outspread, bit by bit. Ahead of her, the bird's wings started to catch fire, first a flow of individual sparks, then a rush of golden white flame that encompassed her with a comfortable warmth, as though she were enclosed in the tail of a comet. The molten rock beneath them rushed closer and closer, the incredible heat, and suddenly everything around them was black. Aili spilled out onto something hot and spiky in bright sunlight, watching a red bird zip up into the air above her as she rolled and tried to catch her breath. Behind her, she saw a glowing ring in the air, an outline of white-hot fire which immediately faded away. "Get up, get up, get up!" The bird had swooped back down, trying to grab her by the hair, but she managed to stand on her own and wave her hand. "What's going on?" "Run! Follow me!" Running, that she could do. She pounded behind the red bird at her top speed, breathing evenly to keep herself focused. "Where are we going?" "There." The only thing she could see that was there was a line of hills in the distance. They were not close. She kept her breath for running and turned around only once. Behind them was a line of shadow like a wave on the ocean, and like foam on the ocean there were bits that were flying and reaching out ahead. Some of these bits, in the split second she had to see, seemed to have faces, but the faces were all alike and all monstrous. Whatever this thing was, it was one being, not many. The faces had eyes and noses, but no mouths. The mouth was the wave itself, growing higher and higher behind them like a sleeper wave. Never turn your back on the ocean, she thought, panicked, and dug her toes into the earth, which felt like deep sand dragging her down, even though it looked like ordinary golden grass. The grass ahead of her got longer, and she realized it wasn't quite ordinary. It was as sharp as razors. As the grass blades slashed through her uniform pants and the skin of her legs, her blood spattered all over them, and they made a gleeful, high-pitched laughing noise. Her skin healed immediately, but the slashing continued, and she started to feel a tingling in her muscles. She couldn't tell if the wave was catching up. Instead of looking, she put her head down and ran for her life. Before they reached the distant hills, they started to pass boulders. First small ones, then larger and larger, some large as houses. They reminded her of the standing stones near her home, set into the gentle hills without rhyme or reason. But these were a crystalline blue, not the rough gray rock she was familiar with. The red bird swooped off to the left, and she followed it, but now they were running parallel to the wave, and it immediately took advantage. The smallest bits of shadow were splashing near her feet when she saw the red bird perch on a single blue rock straight ahead. Get in, just keep running without stopping." The crystal face loomed up in front of her, and she ran full tilt into it, not even taking the time to wonder what it would feel like to smash her skull on a rock. Suddenly, she was surrounded with a dim, filtered light, and the red bird was landing beside her and transforming into Tainu's tall form. He was still wearing the uniform of an orderly, torn and dirty, gray and ragged against his warm brown skin. He looked down at himself in distaste, picking up his collar with 2 fingers. "Ugh," he said. He took a deep breath. "Well, we made it." Ailey bent over, gasping to catch her breath before looking around. Why were you worried?" she asked at last. I thought we can't die." "Well, I don't know about you, to be honest. You're a special case." Tainu stretched and then went toward the back of the room where there was a standing wardrobe. He reached into it and started rummaging around. Thank goodness there's some stuff to change into here. He came out with a dark blue tunic and trousers and casually started unbuttoning his shirt. "Do you want some privacy?" Ailey asked. "To change?" "It's okay, you're not my type," he said. "You should change too. Here." He tossed her another tunic and leggings. "It'll be loose on you and tight on me, but at least it doesn't stink." Ailey realized that her clothes were ripped, but all stiff with blood, her own and others, and she couldn't get them off fast enough. She found that with the opportunity to get something off that was clean, she didn't particularly care about privacy either. With clean clothes, even in such a bizarre situation, came some ability to think. "Who put this stuff here?" she asked. "Is it for phoenixes? Do people stock this up like a rest station?" "I have no idea," Tainu said. "Probably not phoenixes. We don't do long-term planning and we're not here that often. This is someone's house. We shouldn't stay that long." "This is what now?" Ailey looked around, instantly uncomfortable. "Some spirit being's home. There are a lot of beings that belong here. Plenty of them never enter the mortal realm at all. It's not interesting or needful for them." "Don't they lock their doors?" "Not well enough to keep me out, luckily," he said. "I know a few ways to break a ward. It's not my first attempt." "Okay," she said, "fine. But before we leave and start running again, what were we running for and why were we running?" "There are a lot of dangers here," Tainu said, "and to answer your previous question, I don't know what your situation is, and I guess we won't know unless sometime you can't be healed from an injury. But for phoenixes, in the mortal realm, we really can't be killed. If we have an injury we can't heal from, we'll be reborn. That's just how it is for us. In the spirit realm, though, death is death for us. This is our home, and our bodies here are versions of our true body, no matter what we might look like. And there are beings here that hunt phoenixes." "Hunt you? Why?" "For power," he shrugged. "It's not like they tell me their reasons. Anyway, that's why the period of childhood is very dangerous for us, because we have to spend it in the spirit realm. And that," he added, linking his hands and cracking his knuckles, "is why there are refuges with strong wards to protect phoenixes after rebirth, and I'm hoping that Titus and whispered something under his breath." Okay, I'll stop there.
That was wild. So our girl
I know
is a
it's
phoenix.
very wild. So I'll spoiler it a little bit. She's actually not a phoenix.
Oh.
There is some, yeah, but there is something that has happened to her that has made her similar to a phoenix in some ways. And they don't really know what the extent of that is, what has really been done to her, what the rules are for her, because the rules for her seem to be very different than the rules for normal phoenixes. So one of the things about phoenixes in this world, and this is like a lore thing, is that phoenixes are they are immortal. They're constantly reborn every 1,000 years. They have a 1,000-year cycle, um, and they can heal any illness with their blood, any illness, any wound. They can heal other people with their blood in that way, but they cannot use weapons, and they actually can't fight at all. So if they try to fight someone, the weapon will rebound on them, or it will disappear or break. Or if they try to like push someone, it'll be like a wind pushes them back. They actually can't fight even to defend themselves. So on the
Really?
one
Wow.
hand, they're immortal and invulnerable and can't, they can be hurt, they can be heavily injured, they can suffer, they can be killed within the mortal realm, and then they're just reborn in the spirit realm. But they also can't fight or defend themselves. So on the one hand, they're extremely powerful, and on the other hand, they're incredibly defenseless. And so they live in a very hidden way. And they're normally hiding from the other kind of beings, which are demons. So that's part of the interesting lore of the world, is that this is the dynamic that they're living in.
That's wild. So, but before we get into that dynamic, which I do want to get into, I just want to go back to, you said their world is like our world
Mhm.
in fighting war. So, like, it's like, whatever we had in World War II
Mhm.
technology, they have, plus they have magic. Okay. And is the war they're fighting
Mhm.
similar to what was going on in World War
Well,
II?
so
Just,
yeah, yeah, so it's definitely, it was inspired by World War II, and originally I was writing it as a historical fantasy, but then I realized, like, I'm a historian in my, professional life, and I just started getting frantic that I could not make the timeline of the story work with the actual timeline of World War II, and the geography was not cooperating, and things were not, doing what I wanted them to do. So I made it
that
into more fully
always
fantasy, but it's
happens.
still very, I would
Yeah.
say, yeah.
That always happens with
It does.
fantasy books. We
I'm in
start
awe of people that
in one
really
place,
do it.
and then the story drifts about 100 miles from it, and we're
Yeah,
like, "Wait, how did this happen?" But it's better this
yeah,
way, but it
yeah,
doesn't, yeah. So, anyways, go on. I feel your pain.
yeah, yeah. I mean, like, I'm like, once I like let go of like trying to get every little historical detail right, like it was very freeing. So I wish I did that earlier, but yeah. So it was there in the world that they're in. Magic is actually not known. So all of these spiritual beings, they are not known to normal human beings. Normal human beings don't use magic, don't believe in magic. They're using guns and warships and radios and the kind of things that they had in World War II. And there's not there are not a lot of spiritual beings in the world, and so they're pretty well hidden. And so when Eiley starts encountering this, it's completely beyond her experience. Her culture doesn't even have legends about this kind of thing. So like there are cultures that do at least have legends about it and would kind of recognize what's going on, but Eiley's culture is not like that. She's just like, this is completely bizarre, and I cannot make sense of this at all. So for her, it's all a very, very big surprise.
I mean, that would be a surprise for anybody, I think.
Mhm. Well, yeah, there's a lot of kind of like traumatic discovery that Eiley has to go through. So finding out the first book is really the story of Eiley discovering, who she has been, and why it is that Tyre is coming to find her,
Right.
and is also introduces the two other main characters. Tainu, Tainu is a phoenix. He's actually the eldest phoenix. So he's very powerful. So Tainu is the person that Ailey was with in that excerpt. The other main character is a demon, and his name is Juguaren. And so these four characters have a lot of past together, and so they're kind of unraveling their shared past, but also trying to figure out what this means now. Because one of the things that happens sometimes in reincarnation stories, which I love, and this is a reincarnation story, is that it seems like people like remember their past life and like everything is like totally fine. But, in fact, you don't remember your past life at all. You are not the same person that you were in your previous life. You
Right.
have died and you have lived a new life. You are not that same person. And so part of it is that, you can't recapture the past. You can't like undo what has been done. And that's part of what they're trying to do in this book, is trying to, in some ways, undo something that can't be undone. And then since you can't undo it, what do we do now? What do we have to do with like this past and this trauma that we've inherited, basically?
Do they have to
So
are they
that's
gonna
that's
relive
kind of like
it?
what they it is
Or like
relived by
repeat?
Eiley. Yes.
Okay.
It's not repeated, it's remembered.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. So it
So they don't
happened.
have to
It's
repeat it, but
yeah.
they
That's good.
yeah, it happened, it's done. And that's actually part of like it's done. Like you can't repeat it. Like
Right. You
that
can't undo
that
it. You
whole
can't
thing
repeat
that
it.
happened 1,000 years ago. Yeah. Yeah. There's no way forward through that. Yeah. You can't you can't make that not have happened. And several people in the story really, really want that to not have happened, and yet they can't. So try and it's hard to speak about it in such generalities, but it's almost impossible to like not spoiler it, honestly.
Right, right.
So
We're
it's
we're you know, we're
just
trying
have to keep it really general. Uh,
so I wanna go back to something you said. You said that's you started talking about the world, how there's the phoenixes and there's what Eiley is and there's the demons. And I wanna come back to that.
mhm,
Like, tell us more about that. I just
mhm,
now that we understand like that we are in a world that has some technology and
mhm,
guns and things. Um,
mhm. Yeah.
so like
So
where did the demons come from? What do they want? Are they honors? Are they
mhm,
trying to get to it? Like what's going
mhm.
on there?
So so one of the things that's really interesting is that since a lot of this was inspired by just like my great enjoyment of Chinese contemporary Chinese fantasy, in a lot of contemporary Chinese fantasy that's translated into English, there's a beings that are called demons. And so like if you're reading in English, you'll be reading about demons, you'll be reading about the demonic path, demonic cultivation. And the word demon like has a special meaning like in English coming out of European Christianity. And they're evil beings and they want to do evil things. But the word that's being translated from Chinese doesn't have quite the same meaning, yao or yao.
Oh.
And so what's translated as demon, it's a spiritual being that is cultivating power. A Yalmo may be cultivating, corruption or resentment, not or some kind of spiritual power that arises from evil and injustice, and then may affect their own personality and their own way of being in the world. But they are not necessarily inherently evil. They just are. Or sometimes Yalmo can mean a being that's actually created through suffering and resentment and curses. So like something that's actually arising from that evil in the world. But it's not like they are the source of evil in the world. They're more like, in a sense, a result of the evil that's in the world. But
I
when
see.
it's being, yeah, so it's in writing this, like I worked with a cultural consultant, and we talked a lot about the different ways to use Yao or to use demon. And I ended up going back and forth between them. But there's a little bit of a sense of play between the word demon, that is the English sense of an evil
Right.
being, and the Yao, which is a more complicated and more open and complicated figure. And so the demons in this book, they are not inherently evil. So that part of it is similar to the Chinese. They're affected by the kind of spiritual power they cultivate, which is corrupted qi, or resentment. Resentment is another way that it's translated into English. And of course, resentment has a meaning in English. And so, like when we say resentment, we're kind of playing with the English sense and how it's fitting into the Chinese tradition. But it's not quite the same as like the fully Chinese version of all of these things. So the main demon that we get to know in this one is Zhu Guoren, and he is very involved in something that he needs to accomplish, involving creating and encouraging a great deal of suffering in the world, because he will benefit from that. He can cultivate the power of resentment that comes from people suffering and unjust deaths and violence. So it's not like he goes around actually hurting or killing people with his own hands very often, because that's not what he needs. What he needs
Right.
is the development of human suffering. So it's better for him to encourage human beings to do it to one another. And so
I see,
that's
because I was
kind
going
of.
to ask, how do
Mhm,
demons cultivate? So if they're
mhm.
influencing and getting people to do things that would then create what they need, which in this case is suffering, I get you.
Yeah,
So they're
yeah.
influencing, I guess, in some way this war, because a war creates suffering,
Mhm.
and that would, I guess,
Exactly.
cultivate
Yeah.
the power they're looking for. That's
Mhm.
neat.
Yeah.
That's really neat.
So one of the ways that it's different from the Chinese fantasy world is that the demons and the phoenixes realm, which I call the spirit realm. So they're not actually based in the earth realm. They're from a different aspect of reality. And one thing so demons are not immortal, but they're very, very long lived. So Jugoran is something around 9,000 years old at this point.
Wow.
And the yeah, there's some very old beings in this. And one of the things that, like, from the point of view of an immortal being, these wars are kind of like all the same. You know,
Yeah.
in a sense, like, it does not matter to them who wins. Um, for the phoenixes, most phoenixes are mostly just trying to hide from demons. For Tainu and Tyre, they're trying to heal the people they encounter, because they want to help minimize the suffering in the world. Not all phoenixes are like that. Most phoenixes are just like most hiding and trying not to get involved in anything. Um, and the demons are just like, hooray, there's a war. How can we make it worse? And but that would be true of any war, or like any
Yeah.
opportunity they see to encourage more violence, more suffering, more injustice. And so one of the things that actually happens is the war almost like becomes a background, because from the point of view of the immortal beings, this is a war like any other war.
Yeah.
And they see it differently than a human being would.
Which makes sense. I mean, if you've been alive for 9,000
Mhm.
years and you've seen countless
Yeah,
wars, I mean, how many ways are they to fight a war, and how many
exactly.
things are there really to fight over? I mean, it's after a while, it's like,
Mhm,
oh, okay, so it's situation A with opponent B. Okay,
mhm,
I've seen this before. I kind of know what to do to
mhm.
get what I want. Um, let's
Exactly,
so
exactly.
let's.
Like, I
I
I
just
know
want to
I
go.
know how to arrange
Sure.
things to get the most out of this.
Yes. Yeah, but you said something
Mhm,
really interesting. Again, saying that the phoenixes are hiding from the demons. So what's the deal with
mhm.
it sounds like there's some
Oh,
history
yeah,
there.
I
And like
missed that
can
part.
the demons hurt
Yes.
them?
So
Like
mhm,
let's get dig into that a bit,
mhm.
if that's not going to spoil
Yeah,
too many
so, yeah, this
things.
is there's a tiny this I can't, like, not spoiler it, but, there are things, like, I'm on a podcast talking about the book, I have to say something. So, this is, like, this is world building. So yeah, the phoenixes and the demons they're both coming from the spirit realm, which is
Gotcha.
it's just different. It's never fully explained how they relate to each other. Like they're inside the worlds, even if they're going between them. Like they don't know what the world looks like from the outside. So the spirit realm is their natural place, and they can move back and forth between the spirit realm and the mortal realm. So in the mortal realm, phoenixes cannot really die. In the spirit realm, they can really die. And
Oh, that's
demons
interesting.
have yeah. And so demons have discovered that a phoenix's blood, because it's immortal blood that constantly has the beginnings of life in it, can be used to create very, very powerful spells. And there's a lot of spells that require a phoenix's blood. And so, what a demon will try to do, demons will try to capture phoenixes and magically restrain them and essentially
Ooh.
um, collect blood from them. So, I should mention, like in terms of content warnings for people that are sensitive to blood, there is a lot of imagery of blood in the books. So, the blood of the phoenix is what the demon wants, and but the phoenixes are very hard to catch because they can hide very well. um, they try to get out of the spirit realm as soon as they can after rebirth, because the spirit realm is where they can be captured and actually killed. But in the mortal realm, demons that capture phoenixes can essentially keep them alive for hundreds and hundreds of years, but constantly
Ooh.
collecting their blood, which is a painful process because they're always going to heal and they won't die. So for a phoenix to be captured by a demon is a horrible, horrible fate. And so they try to hide to not be noticed. And that's one of the reasons that phoenixes don't actively go out in the world and heal people, because that draws attention to them. And eventually there are many, many more demons than phoenixes. There are very few phoenixes. So demons that start hearing about a phoenix are going to get really excited and do their best to capture that phoenix.
Yeah.
Um, and so when a phoenix does go through rebirth, they have a period of childhood in the spirit realm. And during that period of childhood, that's when they're most likely to be captured. And so that's the most dangerous time for them, is right after they're reborn in the spirit realm.
Wow.
There's,
And
I know there's a lot,
yeah.
honestly.
So okay, so they're born in the spirit realm, and then how do they get from the spirit realm to like how do they get a body and like
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Yeah. So
that's like how do you
so
okay, I'm reborn in the spirit realm. Now what do I do? Like, do you remember
mhm.
anything? Like what do you like you're in the spirit realm, you've
Oh,
just been
that's a really
reborn. What happens? Like
mhm,
what do you know? Do you know anything? Um
mhm.
and how do you get to
Yeah, so that's
out of the
actually
spirit realm?
that's a really, really important question. So,
Yeah. Do you know you have to get out of there, or are
so
you just kind of like chilling?
yeah. So, phoenixes, they don't have parents, so like saying they're born is not quite the thing, but they are awakened into consciousness in the spirit realm, and they live their life and they go through rebirth. When they go through rebirth, they do know who they are. So this is the difference between like what might be reincarnation for a human being and rebirth for a phoenix. A person that's reincarnated does not know their past, does not know who they are.
Okay.
They're born as a baby. They have no idea. A phoenix always retains their consciousness. They always know who they are. They know who they've been. They know their history. Um, so the in this world, in the world of the books in general, like in terms of world building, one of the aspects that comes from the Chinese fantasy tradition is the
Mhm.
idea that spiritual beings and natural beings, animals, plants, things that have life, can develop sentience through cultivating spiritual power, and they can cultivate to the point where they can take on a human form. And for phoenixes, since they are they are natively incredibly powerful, imbued with spiritual power, they can develop, they can transform into a human being very early, just like probably
Mm,
a few hours after rebirth. A demon would have to cultivate for several hundred years before they are able to take a human form. A human form is not their native
I
form.
see. I
Um,
see.
but in the world, like there's also animals and plants that cultivate human forms. And if their cultivation goes wrong or they begin, cultivating resentment or corrupted chi, then they transform into monstrous beings rather than human formed beings. And so it's all based in the idea of cultivation. So I don't know if you've ever read like any cultivation novels
Mm,
or are
not
familiar
like
with that genre
this.
at all.
Um,
Well, this is
I've
different
read.
than
I mean,
a
I've
little
read
different.
some things that were called that said they were cultivation or progress that said they were cultivation and progression, and it was about growing your
Mhm,
magic and stuff. But like, there was
mhm,
nothing in there about like non-sentient creatures. I'm still stuck on that. So so I'm a plant.
mhm,
How do I cultivate
uh-huh,
things like as plants aren't conscious? Like, how would a non-conscious
mhm,
plant cultivate? Like, are they just like somebody wanders by with good energy and they soak some of it up, and that's how they get enough of it that they can
yeah,
get to another level where they can like think about, oh, maybe I should get some more of this good vibes and see where I can
mhm.
go with this.
Yeah, I don't do a lot with the plants cultivating forms, cultivating consciousness, but
Right.
I do have like at least one in the books. But I think so this is where like it's me just kind of experiencing Chinese
Hmm.
fantasy in English translation and trying my best to learn about how the system works. It's coming out of Taoist and Buddhist philosophy
I
and
see.
Chinese traditional religion. But the I think the basic idea is that the world is full of qi, which is the spiritual energy of that's created by and maintains living beings and life. And there are places in the world that are auspicious, that are filled with this energy, in this positive, powerful energy, and things that are lucky enough to be in those places will soak in that energy and can through that cultivate. Um, One of the things that in my understanding, and then I think that like comes up in one of the books, is that um, everything can and does cultivate, but cultivating intentionally is something that only beings at a certain level of sentience can do. And
I see.
um, human beings can also cultivate. But in the world that Ailey lives in, that tradition of cultivation has been completely forgotten. So no one knows that human beings can do this. She's never heard of cultivation. Um, but in the past, there were human beings that were cultivators and would also cultivate spiritual energy, but they would never be as powerful as the demons or phoenixes. And
I
so
see.
that's because they're both naturally more connected to chi, but also because they live a lot longer. The longer you live, the more you can cultivate, and so the more power you are bringing into yourself.
That makes
Um,
sense. That makes sense.
but yeah, yeah. So it is a cultivation world. Um, and it's built around this idea of cultivation, but it's not a progression fantasy. So yeah, progression is like more about, yes, like you're constantly becoming stronger. So in this
Hmm.
one, obviously like the idea that you become stronger through cultivation is like foundational to the world,
Right.
but that's not what it's about. It's not about like how am I going to keep cultivating and keep becoming stronger. It's actually not about that at all. And
I
in
see. I
some
see.
That's not the point
They're
of the
sort of
book. This like not yeah.
Yeah, they're passively doing this, it's not an active thing that's going on.
Well, and they don't need to. So that I mean, both the phoenixes and Juguaren, they both have to cultivate in order to maintain their power. But they're all already so powerful is that they're not wandering around, thinking I've got to cultivate so I can, beat this person in a battle or something like that. They're thinking, I need to cultivate to get stronger for other reasons. It's not about like in a lot of progression fantasies, like I'm
Mhm.
just going to keep making myself stronger so I can win this next battle, or I can have a higher ranking, or I can, do this or that or the other thing. In this one, they need to become stronger to survive, to protect one another, to try to undo this thing that they um, have all been involved in the past. So, and in some ways, what ends up happening is they end up becoming less powerful in the story. And so part of it is about like what it means to actually give up some power that you've become very much used to having.
Right. Oh, wow.
And what does it, once you have a power that is far beyond what human beings normally have, which is what happens to Eiley, how do you deal with that? That you are now, no longer like other human beings, and you can do both very good and helpful things and really horrific things. And this is a power that now you have to deal with, even though you never wanted it.
Yeah. Wow. And you said that this is also a love story. So Eileen's got something special out there
It's
that
very much love
she's
story.
got to find,
Yeah.
or has.
Yeah.
So she's got to find that person.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it starts with Tyree coming to find Eiley. And
Okay.
Tyree and Eiley are, the central love story. Um, but then Tyree disappears and Eiley has to find her. And so that's actually kind
Oh,
of like
okay.
the inciting incident, where Eiley has to find what has happened to Tyree. And then there is, because it's dual timeline, there is a nested love story with two characters, and I don't want to get spoilery, but it
Okay.
is very much about people's relationship and past intertwining together. Um, and yeah, and it's really it's structured around the love story, but it's not a romance, as I discovered, um, from people that read a lot of
Oh,
romance.
okay. So,
So
a
it
happy
is a love
ever
story
after
or a
is not
romantic, but
guaranteed.
not a romance.
Yeah. Gotcha. Gotcha.
Not spoiler, not spoiler. There's lots of there's a lot of things that happen. So this is like the worst description of a book ever. Like there's a lot of things that happen in the book.
I mean,
So,
that's every book. That's a little bit
um,
general there.
yeah, it is. It's every book. It's every book. How do people do this? How do they talk about their books without spoilers? I need to take a class in how one does this.
A
But
lot of authors
yeah.
figure out like what spoilers they're comfortable giving out, and they'll give those out. I think if you have a
Mhm.
longer series, then spoiling the first book, you don't care, because if like I have a series with 10 books in it, spoiling the first book,
Uh-huh.
sure, there's 9 others. I'm not going to tell you what happens, except some fun
Mhm.
tidbits
Yes.
that may interest you
Yeah.
in going further and deeper into the series. But when you have 2,
Yeah.
that's rough. So the nested love story, is
Yeah.
that in the past? Because you said the story crosses centuries.
Yes, it's so there's a nested love story in the past, and then there's also a an ongoing and unexpected love story as well, which turns out to have roots in the past as well. So like there's a lot about how the past shapes the present, and
Yeah.
that's also going on. So yeah, and it's it's very much about how people love one another and what it means to love and commit to one another in a very complicated world when people have a lot of baggage that they're bringing into any interaction.
So
And I
at
will
the
say, like,
end,
it's
go on.
queer all the way down. So, like, everybody's queer in this book, more or less. So,
No, that's cool.
mhm,
It's unapologetically queer, and that's cool. That
very much
totally
so.
cool.
It's one of
So
the things that
go on.
I do love about a lot of the Chinese fantasy novels that I read. A lot of them are very unapologetically queer, and it's very enjoyable. Like, there's no explanation, there's no justification, there's no like we're the only two people like us in the world. It's like, there's there's a lot. A lot of the characters are in queer relationships. So
That's cool though that it's like normalized. Like
Mhm.
And not fetishized, which I think that's awesome because
Mhm.
love is love, and like who cares who you love as long as they're consenting and they're an adult and nobody's being
Mhm.
forced to do anything they don't want to do. Hey, have fat, go have fun.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
that's my
And
take
that's
on
a
it. Not that people
complicated
care,
thing. Yeah. Mhm.
because you
No,
can't help
that's
who you
awesome.
love. Yeah, so I was
Mhm.
gonna say, so you said it's a duology, and this is the
Mhm.
end. So these are the only books you're gonna write in that world. Are there gonna be any tie-ins, or is there any like
No,
you've completely
no,
wrapped
there
everything up
will
in a
be
bow at the
more.
end?
No, there I'm actually working on the next book in the series now, and
Woohoo!
it's one of the things that I'm wrestling with, like, is this really, like, a series, or is this a second duology that's in the same world? Because the duology does complete a story, like, it completes the arc of Eileen, Tyree, in a very satisfying way, but, then because these are pretty much immortal beings, obviously, like, life is not over for them,
Yeah.
and, yeah, and more will happen, and so the next book in the world or the series is called The Sea Glass Tide, and it's actually I think it's almost done. Like it's in revision right now, and after after multiple revisions. So I'm hoping that I can publish that in the next year, maybe even by the end of this year if I move really quickly. But I want to make sure that it works and that it's emotionally satisfying. So um, it's it's a different, I mean, it's in the same world, but it is set forward about 300 years after the close of the second book in the duology. And the main character is a side character in the duology. So it's really, and it's dealing with very different challenges. So yeah, I'm working on that, and it's been really rewarding and exciting, and I'm looking forward to it being in its final form so I can talk about it more. But
Nice. And
yeah.
so after that possible duology, well, is there going to be more? The characters in the world. It sounds like you've got
Yes.
a really interesting world that you could do a lot with. I hear the characters crying
Mhm.
out for more.
Yes. So yeah, actually, but yes. So the next book is almost done, and I think that I'm like, oh, that book's gonna be a standalone, but I don't think it will. So I think that book will be a duology also. And then I actually have almost completed in draft, a second trilogy that is also set in the future. It's set closer to 1,000 years, or maybe longer than that in the future. And that one is also very different. It has a lot of different characters, and it's in the same world, but it's a very different setting, and it's more of a political book than this one was. So like in this book, like I said, the demons and the phoenixes are like, all wars are the same. Phoenixes are like, we're sad for the suffering. Demons are like, we're really happy with the suffering. But wars are wars, and they're not getting involved in like any of the politics. They're not saying we really hope these guys win. From their point of view, like it's all the same. So in that future trilogy, there's much more of getting involved in the human world, and
Okay.
in human issues of oppression and suffering. But those ones exist in early draft, and so they're definitely going to need more revision before they see the light of day. So,
But that's
but they
interesting
they
that,
do
like
exist in yeah.
that's interesting that 1,000 years later, they're like, "Well, maybe not all wars, are the same. Maybe this war is different and we should get involved." That's interesting. That'd be interesting to find
Mhm,
out what
mhm,
motivates them this time to get involved and why nothing that came
uh-huh,
before, like, motivated them to do it. Like, what is different about this one? So
mhm,
that'll be very interesting to find out.
yeah. Yeah, and that one, I mean, like, in that one, it's so in that future trilogy, there's more about the nature of the spirit realm, and how it relates to the mortal realm. But there's also as we discover, I will spoiler this trilogy that probably no one will see for years. So like there's
They
a
won't
third realm, which
remember.
is like, yeah, someone will dig this up on YouTube and say, "Ha, but you said you would do
That'd be
this and then
awesome.
you didn't." But so there was going to they discovered that there's the third realm, which is the realm of the dead, because the spirit realm is not the realm of the dead. It's the realm of spiritual beings, but there is also the realm of the dead. And so in the future trilogy, there's a lot more about how these three realms interact. And there's a lot more emphasis on some human characters, some new human characters, as well as some new characters that are coming from these other realms. And so there is like some pretty like awful war stuff going on, which again, like the demons and the phoenixes, have seen a million times. But it's also they're realizing that, like, we can't really sit back and just like be around the edges of this anymore. So like a decision is made to actively become involved in some of the wars that are going on, but they're mostly because the demons are getting more heavily involved in the in kind of, let us say, hands-on management of the of the human world. And there's a new kind of spiritual creature that we'll learn, a few new kinds that we'll learn about in that trilogy, and they're also getting involved. And so like it's a very, very complicated situation, and human beings are mostly just like, suffering a lot in this.
Yikes.
And so
So
that's what's
it sucks to be human in that trilogy.
well, it does and it doesn't. I mean, like, you could say it always sucks to be human, but it's also like people live good lives and looking for happiness and finding love and stuff like that. And the suffering that they're experiencing is mostly at the hands of other humans, which is why, from the Phoenix point of view, like we can't stop it because we can't control humans. Like, how could we do that? That's what demons try to do, is manipulate
Right,
humans.
right.
And so the ways in which they get involved are a little bit unexpected at that point.
That sounds fun.
I hope it will be. There are definitely a lot of really, really cool characters. And so that's why I keep thinking, like, okay, I owe it to you. I owe it to you, amazing characters, to finish that trilogy and get
And
it
then
out in the
plot the
world.
next one.
I really think at that point, I mean, I do have ideas for like other worlds that are different and have different
Oh, that are
things going
calling
on.
out for you?
Um, yes, I do actually. So much so that I'm like, after I finish book 3, can I take a break before I write the next book and then like write something in a different world? But I feel like I'll feel really, really awesome to have completed, all of the parts of this world that are calling to me, and complete those stories and bring it to the strongest ending that I can. So yeah, so the duology, though, as it is out in the world, the Crane Moon cycle, that is a complete and satisfying story. So that's like why it is, a duology, and why I put them together into one book so that the two books can be read together. That's actually like one of my greatest fears. My greatest anxiety as an author is that people will stop after book 1, and I'm like, no, because you don't get all the satisfaction unless you read to the end of the story, which is the end of book 2. And so that's why I really want to make it easy for people to read both books as much as possible.
Nope, that's awesome. So, all right, so we've got the duology, then we got another duology coming, and then a trilogy
Hmm.
coming. So the first book in the
Hmm.
second duology may be out towards the end of this year, beginning of next year. The trilogy, should we look
Hmm.
for that in 2024 or 2025?
I think it depends on I think it really depends on how quickly I can complete the second book of the second duology. Because then, once I do that, then the trilogy already is pretty much completed in draft. So then it's a lot of revising, and I don't know like how you feel about revising as an author. If you'd rather be rough drafting or revising, do you have a preference?
Like I'm weird. I write the story from start to finish and then that's it. Like I do any revising I'm going to do while I'm writing it and then um
Mhm.
don't really make many changes. Once I get to the end of the book, like I don't make very many changes cuz I reread cuz I work full time and so
Mhm.
I try to write every day. Sometimes I just can't cuz work whatever. And
Mhm.
so, sometimes there could be a couple of days where I don't get to write just because I'm working and I can't. I get home too late and I'm pass out and
Mhm.
that's it, and I have to go do the whole thing again and again and again. So I have an app on my phone, that reads it back to me. So I like to take long walks, so it'll read it to me, and I
Mm.
will just
Mhm.
I have it open on my phone, and I just make, like, changes, like, as if you're listening to a AI read the book back to you, you can listen to 10,000 words in an hour. And that could be 5 chapters
Mhm.
if they're 2,000 words each, or it could be 2 chapters if they're 5,000 words each.
Mhm.
And so you can get a good chunk of the story at one time. And so I do that as it, like the whole as I'm writing it. And so by the time I get to the end of it, like I've already gone through like the first, like all of it multiple times, listening to it. And sometimes I'll read it like if I don't have much going on at the when I should be doing other
Mhm.
things. um, and so like I've already gone over it and rethought it and changed things that by the time I get to the end of the book, like I just need to like revise, like not even really change too much, but like just edit like the last couple of chapters and go through them a bunch of times. And I don't know, I'm strange. That's how I do things. Just by
No,
the time I get to the
I
end of the
think you
book,
are
like
definitely
the mystery's gone.
yeah.
I don't want to be dealing with it anymore. I want to just push it out into the world and move to the next thing. 'Cause I get bored with it. So
Mhm.
like I try to get everything
Mm.
done
Mhm.
while I'm still like chasing the mystery of like, how does this freaking thing end?
Oh, that makes total sense to me. Like, I can't do that for whatever reason. Like, I need to write through to the end of the story, and then I think I've written the best story ever, and then like I find out, oh no, actually, it's not the best story ever. And so like I trying to go back. This book, what's the Sea Glass Tide? I wrote I wrote in during the Clarion West Write-a-thon last July, and I was just I like push myself. I wrote 100,000 words, more than 100,000 words
Wow.
in like 3 weeks. And I did that by throwing fight scenes at a wall. And I'm just like gonna write another. I've got to write something exciting. So like just like fight scene after fight scene
Wow.
after fight scene. And then discovering, you know what? I've got like so many points of view. Um, that's actually boring. Like it's just like 100,000 words of fight scenes. It's not exciting anymore. It's not interesting. And like so like the basic story that I wanted to tell in that book like is the same basic story, but figuring out how to tell the story, like going back and making sure that the story is like engaging for a reader. I had to do a lot of work on that, which is why it's taken a year of revisions really. And so like trying to like really push it to get it all done in 3 weeks, like now I know like that's maybe not the best strategy because it takes me a year to fix that. And yeah, like I think I'm a heavy reviser. And then like also of course like I had written these three other books also like within the past year, the other books that are in draft. And but the thing is like
Yeah.
I wanted to write all the way to the end of the story of the series. And then but now like I have so much to revise and less opportunity to just like start writing a new story. And so sometimes like you love to say like you energy of the new story. But I have to like get the old story to its completed form. So I have to like keep working on it until that is done. But that's why like I was saying like I kind of want to write about this completely different character in a completely different world, and write that novel, but I feel like I want to finish this too. So I'll probably keep focusing on this at least until the series is done. So yeah, I wish I was one of those people that could revise while I am writing. I am not that person. I have to like write it all out and then go back and revise.
Yeah, I just like I said, like I get by the time I get to the end of the book, like I don't want to deal with it anymore. I want to move to the next
No,
thing.
I
So
totally get that.
I developed a
Yeah,
system where I can get everything
I
done so
totally
that
get
there's
that
the
feeling.
littlest
And
bit
it's also
left.
it's mhm. Yeah, like, did you say you have 21 books? I mean, clearly the
Hmm.
system works very well. So,
Well, I mean, it's
um,
something
and
I've
it's cool
developed
that,
over
like
time.
mhm. You also, like you said, like, you like to listen to your books, and I have also
Hmm.
heard a lot of people say that that's really helpful. I don't really like listening to books. Like, I don't listen to audiobooks really,
Oh,
and, I don't like listening to people read to me, and so, I for me, I know I would just, like, space out listening to my own story. I wouldn't be paying any attention at all because that's what
yeah.
happens when people read to me. Um, but I do like to walk around and listen to music and think about my story, and that's, like taking those long walks is really, really helpful for that.
Yeah, I loved it. The long walks.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good way to like think, you're away from computers and
Mhm.
just the brain can go off and like,
Yeah.
and so sometimes that screws up your outline because your brain plays that game of what if we did
Mhm.
this? And you're like, no, no, we can't. We're supposed to get from point A to point B. There's
Yeah.
no C, you know?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, so I like to it's almost like free associating, and then, like, my brain can solve
Oh
problems that I
yeah.
can't solve if I'm staring right at it, but, like, kind of, like, walking around and just letting my brain do whatever, then, like, the solution comes. So, that's really a good method for me.
No, that is yeah, I mean, for me, free association is dangerous, and I come up with like other series, and like, no, no, we need to finish the thing we are working on right now.
As
Don't
long as
get,
you
we've written 21 books in this world.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
we need to. I don't think I'm ever gonna write in any other world. This one
Mhm.
is just there's too many things that are just
Mhm.
calling out for attention, as you put it. Um, yeah. Is there anything else you want to say about the Phoenix and the Sword, about I was trying to remember the name
Hmm.
of the second book. It has such a cool name.
Uh, the Shoreless River is the 2nd
That's it,
book.
the
Yeah,
Shoreless River, and or the
yeah.
Sea Glass Shattered.
The Sea Glass Tide The Sea Glass Tide is the
Okay,
one that I'm
those are
working on now,
cool.
that's my work in progress.
How
That's
do you
yeah,
where do you get
hopefully
these
gonna
titles from? These are cool
well,
names.
like, I went through many terrible titles first, so, like, until I got to those, um but yeah, so and really, like, some of them are really bad. Um yeah, I think the titles kind of, like, capture kind of the vibe of the books
I
too,
see.
which is, there's, like, a certain, I don't know, to me anyway, like, they have the titles reflect something that's very important about the book, and, maybe it won't make sense until it gets read, but, the titles are related to the themes of the books for sure.
Oh, that's an
Um
interesting way of doing it, because I tend to be like, hit you on the head with it. I'm
Mhm.
like, something is revealed, the name of the book is revealed to me. I tend to be pretty obvious like that. Somebody is trapped, the name of the
Mhm.
book is
Yeah.
trapped. Somewhat spoiler there,
Mhm.
but like, I'm just not
Yeah. Well,
like
I mean, the
creative with
Phoenix and the Sword is,
titles.
like, pretty it seems like pretty super obvious, but no, the Sea Glass Tide, which is the one that I'm working about now, like, I don't know, like, if you've ever been to, like, a beach that has sea glass on it, how, like, you find these treasures of
No.
glass that have been broken and thrown into the ocean, and they get washed and tumbled around until they're very, soft edged and, um, they're not the same color or the same texture that they used to be, but they're still really beautiful. And so, like, that's kind of what motivated me. Like, that's kind of like underlying that title. And the sea glass tide, that there is a tide that you actually can't resist. Like, no one can resist the tide. The tide comes in,
Mhm.
and you can't change it. there's something about the time of the world and how the world works that is irresistible. And so yeah, those were kind of the images that underlay that title and that are part of the themes of that book.
That's such a beautiful, like, that's so beautiful. I'm jealous. You have
Thank
such
you.
beautiful book titles. And I'm just like, my title is The Hammer hitting you over the head with what's inside.
Yeah,
So
I don't know, but like, yeah, but then like I can like come on a podcast and like I can't tell you, but things happen in my book, So like a lot of things
yeah,
happen. It's a good book. Go read it. Like this is like,
but
and here's the title. Like this is what I'm giving you. So and
we
yeah,
got a lot of we got a lot out of you. I think we squeezed you dry.
you
We got some
did.
spoilers.
I shared many things. Yeah, there are some spoilers, and this is actually the first time that I've ever talked about the world in any systematic way. So you're the first to like hear about actually how the world works aside from how we discover it in the
Oh,
stories. So yeah, and it's fun to have that opportunity to do it. So thank you.
no, this was really fun. I was like blown away by some of the it's so different, the from because I guess like a lot of fantasy authors that have come on here have been more the like Western side, and we're all kind of pulling from similar traditions. This is like this was just a real treat. This was just it was very different, just very interesting. And just thank you so much for coming on here. I
Thank you, Melinda.
now
I
I'm never
appreciate
gonna
it.
stop thinking about plants that can cultivate.
I know. Well,
I don't
you should
know
not
why.
because many if that actually happened in your world, you would want to be prepared. So
I mean,
I
I'm now
recommend.
half afraid that's what's going on. I have enchanted forests and they're quasi-intelligent. I have this giant
Mhm,
enchanted tree. She's the queen of all trees. She's very intelligent and she's a magic user and like never
mhm,
don't I still haven't quite worked out like where the forest came from. I have some ideas or where she came from. And like now I'm like,
mhm,
what if, like now like the cultivation thing is in my head and I'm like, could that be? This is like
mhm,
she's just this beautiful, awesome. She's just a fixture. She's in
mhm,
every book somewhere.
mhm.
And like they never really eventually I have to delve into like where did she come from? The how did there get to
Yeah.
be this very magical, very sentient tree, who wanders around and like she has plans. She's actually the queen of the country. She's a tree. She's not human. She
Mhm.
was never human. And like
Uh-huh.
just she's just so cool. Like there's so many
Yes,
other
that
things
is
and I
really
just never
cool.
got to that. So now I'm like, but plants can
Yeah.
cultivate. Now I'm like, God, what would happen if my enchanted forest were to
Mhm.
cultivate itself?
I
I'm
know.
a little
Well, maybe they
afraid.
already did, and that's like nobody remembers that cultivation exists, and like that's the thing. Like I think sometimes it's interesting, it's to not know like how something magical came to be, or that the people in the world are like telling legends about it, but those legends could be wrong, and like different people are going to have different opinions about what it is, and maybe
Right.
the sentient tree also has an opinion, and maybe her opinion's not right, because people, beings may not know how they came to be. Um, so for me, like that's just all very interesting. And one of the wonderful things about fantasy worlds is that it's not all laid out in front of you, in front of anybody that's in the world.
I agree. I agree. And there is a whole bunch of different theories that people throw around in the books about it. And some of them are just like, who
Mhm,
knows?
mhm,
Some mad mage in the past probably did this because you'd have to be nuts to enchant that many miles of forest or be
mhm,
very
mhm,
desperate,
mhm. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, and I think, part of the reason that, this book that I'm working on now is different than the first 2 is the first 2 are very much like a love story, and it's a love story primarily of immortal beings that, have limited interest in in, laying out how the world works for you. But
Right, right.
this book that I'm working on now has more of the world's stakes, and the nature of the world is part of the subject of the books. And so I've actually had to think about it a lot more. So that gave me more. And so maybe with your books that'll happen too. Like there will be a point where what's at stake in this book actually is how the queen of the trees came to be, or how she's going to survive or what threat there is to her existence. And then you have to know, then you have to be able to understand and make it part of the story. But until then, it's just the queen of the trees, doing what she does.
Yeah, I mean, there have definitely been stories where we've had to dig a little into the backstory, and I'm like, oh God, I don't know what her backstory is. She won't tell me.
She's a tree. She's
private.
There's
a few characters like that. Sleeping Angel's another one who won't tell me her background, but she shows up in the book I'm currently writing, and I'm like, will you just please tell me what you are? Like,
it's like, I'm gonna make up a backstory for you, and if you don't like it, then you have to correct me.
And it's like, we're never in her head. It's just her, so she could be completely lying to other people and we would never know. She could tell a version of her story. Actually, she won't tell her story. Like, people ask her, like, who are you? What is your name? And she's just like, no answer. Just nope. Not something I'm going to answer. I'm here to make you a deal, not to answer your questions. That's basically, yeah. So I was hoping we'd get some background on
boundaries.
She zips the lip. She's just, I still don't know if she's a fallen god, a fallen angel, something else. No idea. So I hope I'll get some answers. She's definitely a player.
Yeah,
and she's definitely got power. But we've gone on a bit long. I know you've got a tight deadline. So is there anything else you want to say about your books? And we'll start wrapping things up.
No, this was super fun. I guess the only other thing is, I have a website, I have a newsletter, I'm on social media, I'm on Goodreads, and I actually love answering questions about the books and the characters, and talking about the world. And I love it when people ask me those questions. So, if you want to go ask me a question on Goodreads or, find me on social media and, ask about anything about the books. I really do enjoy having those conversations. So I really like talking with readers that are reading the books and have questions. So that's just a fun thing. And I love to do it.
We'll have all the links because JC Snow generously provided all those links in the show notes or in the description, depending on where you're listening. And thank you so much, JC, for joining us. Again, this has been Fantasy Lore and More. I'm Melinda Kucera, your host. We were talking to JC Snow about The Phoenix and the Sword. And thanks for listening. We'll be back with another fantasy book and another fantasy author and soon. So it's definitely hit the follow button or the whatever it is on wherever you are so that you're notified. So thank you and have a great day or a great evening, depending on where you're listening.